My question is, what do you believe in more? The power of AI or the power of humanity?
I believe, if you're asking me, I believe that there's an infinite resource called ingenuity, and that's not software. It's not an algorithm, and
It's
so I think
humanity. It is.
yeah,
It's and so to me, that that is the story of the spreadsheet and the accountant.
right.
The accountant had no idea what he or she could do until he or she discovered the spreadsheet. Josh, you and I have no idea what we can do as humans until AI is introduced.
Welcome everybody back for another episode. My name is Josh Sutton, SVP of Innovation for 66 Degrees. We're here on another episode talking about AI and all things in the future of work. With me here today is Ben Kessler, CEO of 66 Degrees. Thanks, Ben, for joining me. Awesome topics. Glad you're here. Tell me a little bit about 66 Degrees.
Thanks, Josh. Great to be here. At 66 Degrees, we have a vision to shape the future of work by harnessing the power of AI, data in the cloud. Now, let me break that down and explain what that means. To shape the future of work, we look at work in two different facets or from two different lenses at 66 Degrees. One is we're helping companies better serve their customers. So we're helping the customers with their revenue generating activities, where we not only make sure that they're delivering the value that they've committed to their customers and exceeding their customers' expectations, but we're also delivering so that their customer will come back and buy from them again.
So do you think, so that first category is one of the primary purposes of 66 Degrees to help deploy technology that almost reestablishes the connection with customers for a lifetime?
Certainly. It helps through that entire life cycle, from initial lead or when you initially found out about a business, and then really at the end when a customer is potentially going to leave you, or from a churn analysis standpoint, is how can you make sure that you capture the right customers you should and extract the right value you can out of those customer relationships and deliver that right value to them.
Now, changing the future of work or establishing long-term relations, it's not a new strategy for businesses, but it sounds like AI is actually allowing companies to think about their relationships differently, with that kind of fitting in the middle. AI comes with more complex infrastructure and technology. How would you phrase, or how would you define how AI has changed really, from what we used to understand it to be to maybe what it's going to be in 2025 based on some of the promises? And how is that relevant to business teams?
Yeah, and let me answer that question. So let me finish what our vision of work is. And so it's customer facing. Hey, how are you driving revenue generating activities? But then also, how are you doing so with your operations more efficiently? How are how is your finance and HR and operations teams interacting? And so when we look at the future of work, we're looking at it as, how are you managing your customer interactions, and then how are you doing the work from an operational standpoint? And Josh, to answer your last question is what AI and data are doing. And let me give a couple of examples in each one of these. In the customer relationship, people are making business decisions at this point, oftentimes on their own, or buying decisions on their own. And the beautiful thing about a company is that you don't need the customer agent, the physical or personal customer agent there in front of them. You can actually have a digital agent from an agentic standpoint, or make decisions or help influence that customer with their data in an autonomous fashion.
And I think that's extremely powerful. I think if you think of scaling a workforce, what you're saying is, I can think about deploying AI in a way that helps me scale to meet my customer where they are and have a one-to-one relationship with them based on some degree of intelligence. And that same technology can actually be pivoted inside and run to improve business operations in the fabric of a company from a functional work process. How do you think agents are going to fit with inside of the workforce? And I think this is a hot topic. Agentic AI is an interesting philosophy. How do you think employees feel about having kind of agents deployed next to them, working kind of in the trenches, improving business process?
And what I would say is, I'm a finance guy by background, a business consultant for my entire life, and started in financial consulting. And what I think is interesting is in customer experience and in business process automation, it always was, I need to add a person in order to get a result. In many ways, it allows you to grow, in through like 1 + 1, and adding that additional input gives you that additional output. The beauty of the agentic AI world is that you can apply technology and reach scalability that much faster. It's not a matter of one input leads to one output, and one additional person or one additional customer success person leads to a better customer experience, or one additional operational person leads. Agentic AI leads in many ways to exponential growth for either your customer experience, or you're optimizing your business process. And just let me just double click on how that works. What agentic AI does is think of it as a personal concierge, or an autonomous agent that is either customer facing or internal or process facing. And we can talk through a variety of different industries of where this actually would benefit, but it's learning from your data and your customers' data to make autonomous decisions. And gone are the years of technology where we had one process or one technology focus on one part of the process. In ERP, closing this step of the fulfillment process, or an accounting.
So what you're saying is, now I can deploy this endpoint inside my functional process, and it sits next to technology. I can deploy that intelligent endpoint, and it's more capable than simply just basically responding. And so what you're saying is agentic allows it to function like a person, maybe daisy chaining together different capabilities, interacting and accelerating certain workflows, both affecting customers and internal operations. How is technology?
It can think in many ways.
And so one, that's scary, and secondly, it's exciting all at the same time. What's the biggest hurdle that companies are going to face when thinking about the scale of what you're talking about, and where do they start?
Sure. I think we can take this in a few different directions, but I'd look at three pieces that are going to be the stumbling block of this. I think first off, just data availability. If for these agents to be successful, and these agents to operate as they should, they need to have access to data, and they need to have data readily available so that they can make a decision. It's like bringing in any sort of new employee, is that you're only going to help them be successful, or they're only going to be successful if they have access to data and the right people in order to be successful. The second, what I would say is, not only the first is, do you have the right technical foundations and data and infrastructure in place? The second is this agent interacting with humans to drive business objectives forward? And we at 66 Degrees call this the right engagement layer. These agents are going to have to interact with, and people are going to have to interact with them in order to drive the right outcome. I think an agent set on the sidelines, or an AI algorithm set on the sidelines, is just frankly not going to work. But if an agent can actually be integrated into the right process, and people can interact with through the right application, through the right collaboration tool, through the right BI endpoint, thinking of a Looker, or thinking of an Alteryx, or thinking of a Tableau, can you actually interact and monitor what the agent is doing appropriately? And then just the third here is just change management. Was with a client last night at dinner, and where AI is having a challenge is when people hoard information and don't share information with.
You mean like are you talking like people hoard? Let me back up. So the biggest challenge is not a new challenge. It's getting the right data foundation in place. Having the right data foundation in place allows us to deploy these intelligent endpoints, potentially calling them agents. This is a new pattern. So kind of this agent-oriented architecture and agentic is incredibly new, and it's being poised. You look at the hyperscalers, you look at Salesforce.com, you look at Google with Gemini and some of their agent space. This new pattern is not mature, and so you're saying no matter what happens with that pattern, you're saying the first thing you got to do is solve your data problem. We still have a sea of data, and everybody's drowning in it. And so,
yeah, Josh, we see. I would say we see about we'll reach. I would say somewhere between 50 and 60% of our projects will reach where we've developed a great, very tuned LLM or SLM solution, application where we've tuned it and it's ready to go, but the data isn't ready, and we got to wait a month, or we got to wait a second month in order for that data to catch up, because that AI solution or that agent we've created is useless if it doesn't have the right data available.
And I think that brings up a really interesting point. With the amount of pressure that businesses are facing to deploy AI and realize some of the promises of efficiencies that you talked about, what you're saying is a lot of infrastructure is still required to actually be thought through on how to actually scale the AI capabilities that you're looking for. That's kind of that's a humongous problem to solve. What about the psychology of people that are being supplemented? The change management side, you touched on that a little bit, and I think that's fascinating. The psychology of change is sometimes equally as important as the technology change itself. What are some things that companies can think about in terms of kind of addressing and helping their organization kind of almost welcome the change from a technology perspective? Any pointers there?
Certainly. Yeah, and that was my third point, is saying, I think change management is going to be the hardest. Is that talk to clients, and people are hoarding information, and not giving it to enable the data readiness for AI to be adopted, because they're scared. And I think look, 66 Degrees is a mid-sized growing business, and what I've learned as a leader here and also a leader in front of our clients is you never have to remember what you said if you're transparent and you share the roadmap of what you're planning, with your teams. And so I would share, with clients, first and foremost, be transparent with your people about what your AI roadmap is.
You brought up, and I think that's really great advice. You touched on something else that I find really, really interesting. You touched on, AI and ML kind of creating these predictions and these algorithms, and they're helpful in informing people to do something in a process. And you talked about kind of agentic maybe taking that a step further and maybe acting and kind of fitting between work process and functional areas, or even systems or help flows in a variety of different forms. And that's kind of the wave of change that's going. We're going from prediction to then, the prediction can actually can do a lot more, and it can feel like what a person typically would do within a particular realm of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on something in that kind of dialogue that maybe hit home for me. I started in analytics, and analytics, we had this concept called business intelligence. And by the way, I've got a little gray in my beard, so it actually started at decision support. So it's been around a long time, and it's become BI. You touched on something that is interesting. BI, you said, could potentially receive or get additional capabilities from a kind of agentic plays. Is that a resurgence of like a BI 2.0? Do you see that maybe that interface that's actually in our business becoming more important again? And because I feel like it's been pushed aside a little bit.
I think so, actually. And Josh, let me hit on a couple of topics here on this in responses. I think it's really important for us to figure out how we're engaging as humans with AI, and I think BI can be one of the best ways to do that. AI is brilliant about accelerating it's not going to always make decisions for us. It's going to help us make higher order or higher level decisions. It's going to synthesize and aggregate data. And frankly, I think the way we can leverage that AI is through BI platforms. Another way is through collaboration platforms. But I think certainly, Josh, is that this is a great way of accelerating and allowing us to not be the person preparing the worksheet, or not being the person preparing the graph, but being the person that looks at and works with the AI and interprets the graph and develops and brings to bear more insights that help us do our job better. And I will say it, building on this, my CFO loves to give 66 degrees CFO Aaron Billings loves to give this example is right when I believe Microsoft Excel or one of the first spreadsheets came out, an accounting board wrote and said, hey, the role of the professional accountant is dead. As we know it, there will likely no longer be CPAs.
So wait a second. So you think we're saying that AI is going to have that type of an effect? You think?
Well, just wait.
Okay.
Just let me finish the story. And so this is the fascinating part. And so here's the spreadsheet coming out. Accountants are dead.
Right. Oh, I got it.
Accountants are dead. Accountants are dead. After that announcement, there was the accountant field, grew 10x or 15x,
right.
Because what that perspective was, well, gosh, everything that we know an accountant to be able to do, this spreadsheet and technology is going to wipe away accountancy. But no, accountancy just began at that point.
No, I think that is so interesting because you have the CEO of Microsoft coming out saying, SaaS is dead and agents are going to be kind of the middle tier, and it's going to be this obfuscation layer off the database. And there's different camps, and I think some of the world is going, you know what, you're right. With AI being an intelligent endpoint, very capable, it can think and it can orchestrate. Perhaps it replaces the middle tier. And if you go on LinkedIn and just read a lot of the notes, half the people believe it, half the people think that it's some form of, some collapse to some degree of that middle tier. The analogies that you gave, which is this spreadsheet, replaces the accountant, is not true. It is actually an evolution. And what is formed is actually this evolution of architecture or pattern or functional process being around the technology change. And I think you're absolutely right with that analogy, because I think the open question is AI a revolution or an evolution? And let me ask you that question. Do you think that the spreadsheet analogy is very similar, akin to what's happening with AI and agentic? Are we going to see an evolution of how we work around it, similar to the spreadsheet scenario?
I do, and I think my question is, what do you believe in more, the power of AI or the power of humanity?
I believe, if you're asking me, I believe that there's an infinite resource called ingenuity, and that's not software. It's not an algorithm, and so
it's humanity. So to me, that is the story of the spreadsheet and the accountant.
Right.
The accountant had no idea what he or she could do until he or she discovered the spreadsheet. Josh, you and I have no idea what we can do as humans until AI is introduced.
Well, I'll tell you this, and it was a recent experience that I had, and you might actually find it funny. I gave a presentation and it was a training, and it was around some really complex engineering. And if you just think about an industry blueprint for AI and thinking about a holistic view of transforming a company around AI, and I'm giving a presentation on where you start and how it all fits together. AI was actually in the conversation during the presentation. And AI actually took all the feedback, all the questions, all the dialogue, all the back and forth, the debate, and recrafted a better presentation. And so one, didn't change that the strategy still has to happen. We still have to have a strategy, but it actually helped us convey the message and the importance and the methodology in a way that I as an individual wasn't capable of doing alone. So I think that's pretty interesting. As far as patterns,
it's dependent upon leaders, frankly, to be very clear with their people about the strategy in their business of AI, but then up level and help train and expose their people to AI so you can develop the accountant 2.0 skill set.
So your vote on AI, is it a revolution or evolution? I
think it's a revolution.
Okay, it's a revolution. It's a
revolution.
Okay.
But the only reason I say it is, I understand what you're asking. It's an evolution of humanity in many ways.
So you
But
have
I think
you have a foot in both camps. You have a foot in both camps.
it's a step function. It's a step function
I think it's right.
that says, hey, it's here to hear from what a human can do.
Let's talk about some technology. Agent space, Google's agent space, Power Play. We've kind of gone from this Vertex agents. Now we're in agent space. What do you think customers should be able to expect from agent space as we look forward into 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's interesting as you reflect upon Google, or as I reflect upon Google. Google has an interesting strategy right now. You look at their Vertex AI, which is, hey, here's where you can, in an open environment, build your enterprise AI, pulling a number of different backend models for different use cases, which I think is spot on. We recognize that there's different models and better models for better use cases, and Vertex AI allows you to do that in their model garden, and it allows you to do it in a secure, safe way. I think Google's also really interesting right now on the whole other end of the spectrum. You think about their Willow chips, their quantum chips that they're rolling out.
I'm a quantum guy, so you're getting really excited.
I know.
I
wanted to pull that pull that thread, but I think Google's in a really unique space, frankly, right now of the breadth of what they're doing, and I think agent space is very strategic for them, and this is why.
These episodes are really geared around these kind of conversations. The path isn't set. We haven't figured out the accounting's role with the spreadsheet. And I really love that analogy. But I do think that we're going to find the way quickly in 2025. You touched on quantum.
Let me answer your question on agent space. And so, look, I think agent space is highly strategic because it's allowing people to build and offer agents that are solving vertical focused or industry focused problems. And look, I think we've encountered a number of clients that have step in and say, hey, I'm ready to realize my commitment with Google. I've committed. How do I unleash the backlog? How do I move things? But really where they've stumbled or been stuck is, how do I apply AI in an efficient way to solve the business problem in me as a logistics provider or me as a hospital? And I think what Agent Space is allowing Google to do is offer the best and brightest from an agent standpoint. That's a little bit prepackaged, but at least it's a jump start where other industry competitors have solved this problem with these particular agents in a very, very focused way, because it's
a really good starting point, is what you're saying.
And it's a great starting point, and it's industry focused.
And I could assume, obviously I'm a tech guy, the agent space plays well with the other technical components from GCP. So it's kind of a 1 + 1 = 10 when you think about that.
It is.
Some of the same technologies would, from GCP or Google would also address some of those issues and obstacles that you said are some of the primary challenges and stumbling blocks in kind of the evolution of using AI. Which
data readiness. Is your data available?
So you think that, Google's really rounding out the offerings. They're really figuring out how to provide that core technical foundation from a data perspective. You've got the kind of that middle tier, which is allowing, prediction and AI-oriented inventions kind of within the Vertex platform. And it can actually be packaged up essentially in some sort of, wrapper in a sense inside of agent space for people to use and deploy as a quick start, essentially.
As a quick start focused on a particular problem that they're experiencing, that the data problem or the process problem or the customer experience problem that you're experiencing in hospitality and tourism or media and entertainment is going to be different than the one is in HCLS.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. There would be some degree of uniqueness in terms of maybe algorithms, but how it's actually applied within a work process or how it talks to a particular system that's implemented through, some sort of integration. You touched on quantum. I have this theory, and I'm just curious your thoughts. I believe that prediction, the basis of AI and ML, which creates the backbone of prediction, created intelligence. And what you're saying early on, I was thinking a little bit about that engagement layer. Like technically, we've invented lots of predictions, lots of algorithms, but they don't have a home technically.
Mhm.
So agent space kind of helps start to form, where does that actually live long term, and how does it actually tie to a person's process? But I believe that actually that an agent is starting to kind of package these things up in a way, and the agentic is the pattern to teach the industries on how to actually deploy it in the fabric of their work process. And I think that when you think of quantum computing or quantum powered AI, the way you would scale and manage all of these agents aligned to business objectives to almost calibrate that engine will come from quantum powered AI, that super intelligence. Right or wrong? What do you think?
I think that's right.
Quantum,
Yeah, I think this may be going in the wrong direction, but I think you need an infrastructure where this happens, Josh. And what we're talking about is a tremendous amount of what makes an agent powerful. It's a lot of data and access to data, and it's a trained model that knows how to interact with that data. That if prompted to do this, then you go left or right, or it's the algorithm. And so I think, where does that data live, and where does that agent live, and where does that processing happen? For us, it's up in our gray matter, right? But it,
right?
but it has to live
Right.
somewhere, and it has to be done rapidly. And the only way it can do that is from one of these massive chips, actually.
That's actually interesting. So when you think about these kind of this agent oriented architecture or agentic AI, which will sit inside of work process, when I deploy 1,000 of them, it's probably not going to be a person that does their MBOs or their individual development plans or their performance reviews.
Mhm.
And so if we get the right technical foundation, the infrastructure, the data for AI infrastructure in place, and we deploy the right agentic architecture, then when we actually deploy a lot of them, we can look for AI to kind of be the gas and the brakes for transformation, is what you're saying. So AI will let me spring forward in terms of transformation, gaining efficiencies, but it's actually AI that's going to let me manage it all at the same time.
It's fascinating you say that, because at 66 Degrees, we look at, or we help clients through a few different stages of what I would say, and you're hitting on the third one here. But we think about tech foundations. We think about, how do you build agents, or how do you build AI solutions for your vertical or for your specific business problem? Could it be your customer challenge? Could it be your operation? But then, how do you engage with it? But what you're saying is, you could actually use AI to help the engagement,
That's exactly right.
and actually help. If you were managing 20 different agents, or 30 different agents, or 100 different agents, you may want a master agent
Right.
managing those 20 or 30 different agents. And I think, as we think about kind of the genesis of our conversation here, what we talked about is that you got to have the infrastructure in place. You got to have those four walls of the technology and the data.
Right.
You got to build your agents. But then, how are you managing this at the end of the day?
Yeah, and as an executive of a business, and we look at, we're meeting with leaders kind of in the trenches, kind of defining this real time. I mean, this is not, there's not a 101 guide, there's not a dummies book for this, but I think, what you're saying, there's a progressional path to get everything right underneath. And then as you deploy kind of this intelligence inside of your business, you can also look to enabling your people to manage it towards a business objective to kind of calibrate. But then we can also look beyond that, let's say 26 or 2025 later on, that AI is actually going to help us calibrate these engines to achieve our business objectives, or treat our customers differently, as you talked about earlier, or communicate, or work through a process more efficiently internally.
Yeah, and I think, Josh, you're hitting on something very interesting. Is that I think where there's a gap right now is the roadmap for all of this. I think anybody can step back and say, okay, we understand the infrastructure that needs to be in place.
Right.
We understand the data that needs to be in place. We understand that to be able to put, build agents and put agents in place, and then we understand that we need to have our people. But how do I do this for my financial services business? And what are my competitors doing? And can I learn from them? and so in many ways, if there's a map of how I can drive from Milwaukee here, where my home is, to see you in Orlando, I'm going to take that map every single, and Rand McNally made a multi-billion-dollar business on that. I think there's a massive opportunity here and a need for how in each of these industries can and should you use agents to help with your process.
I think that's the starter conversation. I think, you touched on roadmaps. People don't want to hear about roadmaps because they're long and arduous, but I think the way you describe it as kind of a capability plan that someone should understand and choose from that capability plan based on potentially constraints or headwinds that they have in their business. And I agree with you. I think that maybe 2024 was the age of kind of, kick the tires on it, get some core infrastructure out there. And 2025, I feel like there's pressure to be very engineered, focused around how to do this in some sequential order that has the most significant change, but is also balancing people, process, and technology at the same time. That way it's scaling.
Well, and here's the blast. We're Rand McNally right now, writing the map. You and I couldn't go rewrite the map of the United States. People would be like, well, we've already have that. And if we wrote it wrong, they would point out an error. But right now, we can identify these maps and help customers say, hey, here's where you can identify and apply an agent for this problem.
Right.
Oh, that's innovative.
So there's something you touched on earlier. You talked about, when we're in talking about BI, you talked about it, agents or potentially even predictions helping people make better decisions. Decision support's not new. Do you think that, I can deploy agents to change work process and help me scale for these efficiencies or profit or whatever it may be that I'm after? But were you also touching on they might actually promote intelligent thinking, like AI powered quantitative and qualitative capabilities in a business as a way to up?
And I'm gonna let my dog out of my office. I know we can cut this off.
You got to bring him next time. We are dog friendly at the podcast. What kind of dog, Ben?
Josh, you want to hit that question again?
Yeah. Ben, you touched on something I thought was interesting. You talked a little bit about early on that predictions and AI they create insights and there's an engagement layer, and we were hypothesizing that there's going to be a resurgence of kind of intelligence flowing up through business intelligence platform, mostly because it's already out there deployed in the hands of business people. Were you also making the point that it promotes even further kind of like intelligent thinking, so a degree like a leveling up, so not just being business intelligence, but actually promoting things like AI-powered quantitative and qualitative capabilities?
Absolutely, and let me give an example or two. So, looking back on the accountant example, is accountants became better because of the simple tasks of writing down and balancing both sides of the books was done in the spreadsheet for them. And simple calculations were done in the spreadsheet for them. They were able to then, very quickly create a P&L. We're able to, do much more advanced things than they initially had dreamt possible. What I love doing right now is actually helping my background is finance and consulting. What I love helping clients, finance teams or procurement teams doing at this point is helping take an analyst process of, creating a forecast or, looking at and predicting a futures price of a particular commodity, or at least, using data science and using data engineering to help make that analyst job easier. Because Josh, what you can do then is that, it takes time to gather structured and unstructured data, and then a data science model we can train to actually, help you make a better prediction. But then what that analyst does is actually looks and says, okay, what's driving this prediction at this point? It's giving him or her time to say, oh, okay, now my model is telling me that, I'm my forecast is gonna my forecast over the next 3 months is actually decreasing, or my forecast is increasing. Why is that? Well, maybe that's because of this commodity price. Maybe that's because of weather. Maybe that's because of, one of my customers is actually going out of business. It actually elevates the level of thinking for that analyst, and allows them to pull back. And that analyst then becomes actually more valuable to his or her CFO or his or her CEO. And I think this is what we're doing across the board. We're doing this with law as well,
Right.
in the sense that the models are putting the power of thinking back in people's hands.
I think that's something that 2025 we're not talking about enough. Actually, AI powered quantitative and qualitative capabilities through your traditional BI interface can reach the masses quickly. But here's the fundamental problem. Um, I still have a data gap. I still need to get my hands on data, even if I'm not anything else. Let me ask you this question: Do you think kind of the agent philosophy, the agentic philosophy? Do you think that I could deploy agents to actually maybe replace some of the ETL processes, like data fetch, go get me things to prep to perform the analysis? What are your thoughts there? Like, should I only be thinking about agents from a functional process improvement, or can I think about it doing some of the heavy lift, like get my data, get my hands on data, prep it for me, so that I can perform these more advanced, intelligent thinking functions with kind of AI for BI?
Yeah. So I I think a couple of things on this, Josh. I think certainly, and I think we've seen AI. We've worked with plenty of companies where we've helped create synthetic data, to train these models, and then to your point, you can have agents go and fetch the data, or bring in the right pipeline. I think the other beautiful piece is that, agents are in many times, platform agnostic, or they can pull data from multiple different platforms.
That's where I was at. That exactly. I was just thinking about the bottleneck that you touched on early on. That most companies, if you look at Gartner's research, most companies don't feel like they got the right data infrastructure in place to power their AI strategies, and that kind of could cause problems in terms of velocity of innovation. If we're saying that the BI platform could potentially help power AI powered quantitative and qualitative capabilities, and then agentic plays could go and fetch data that would typically need to go through a software development lifecycle, that's a significant change that didn't change the functional process so much. I didn't have to think about my sourcing teams working. It's actually fixing an age-old problem: data accessibility. Last question for you, Ben.
Well, and let me answer
Sure.
that. What I think is, um, if you look at the eyes through our children right now, if you look at search and research through our eyes, Josh, you have to think about, okay, I'm going to go to Google to ask this question. And in many ways, that's how our enterprise architecture works as well.
Right.
I'm going to put Gemini or ChatGPT on BigQuery, or on my Azure database, or on my Databricks database, and it's going to retrieve this information. And I have to get all the right information in there so that I can retrieve the right information. The beautiful thing about agents at this point is kind of looking at the world through our children's eyes. Our children's eyes will ask their phone, hey, what what's the weather like today? My 9-year-old son every morning looks what the weather is like. He doesn't really care where that data is stored.
It's cold where you're at too, but
It is, but in many ways, he lives in a world that's mesh, frankly.
right.
And I think that's the beauty of agents at this point, is they can pull this data from everywhere.
I think that's back to some of the foundational tech that you're talking about that needs to evolve. There's in the data space, we're always so worried about getting our data centralized. And what you're saying is that the heavy lift, actually, we can put that on in kind of more of an agent architecture and work in more of a decentralized mesh, but leveraging agents to kind of proxy for us. I think it solves a lot of problems. And perhaps maybe that's the pattern that you're thinking, that we can build our AI strategies a little bit faster, and bring life to them quicker if that a core foundation is in place.
I think that's right. I think I think there has to be still a sufficient amount of data available. Is where that data lives or where that data is stored, I think is less of a constraint at this point. I think it's,
So I don't need to have an ETL mapping where I'm piping things through and some 4G technology.
into one location.
That's right.
But I better make sure that if I'm building a model to predict the weather, I better have at least enough weather data for the past 1 or 2 or 3 years to actually influence that model. Well,
Right.
we'll see many clients that, again, forget that it's in the right place, or whether it's on SharePoint, or whether it's in Snowflake, or whether it's in BigQuery.
Right.
That's fine. That's a problem we can get around. But oftentimes we won't. We'll have a client that says, "Hey, we want to do this, but we really don't have any of this data." That still is a very critical problem we need to get around.
And what you're saying is unified data platform today doesn't necessarily mean everything has to live there.
Not
That
at all.
that's interesting. I think that's going to be well received in the market, especially with some of the obstacles that we've had just in data engineering and data pipelines and the software engineering that goes into that. Do you see AI affecting or helping with that kind of data engineering as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think certainly, software development lifecycle.
Yeah.
I think will certainly, it will accelerate the software development lifecycle. Um, I don't think the profession of data engineer ever goes away. I think the profession of data engineer just looks very different because, again, how data readiness and data preparedness, if you look at this agent, we still need that data to feed into that agent. And so I think AI is going to modify and change the world of a data engineer, but it never goes away.
Maybe it makes them more productive. Maybe it allows them to fulfill more demand needs on data to AI stack. There's a variety of things that, just having this discussion made me think about, if agents can change a functional process, then the agent can actually work in the data space, and maybe I can solve some of these data problems that are slowing down my AI initiatives. I think that's interesting, Ben. Ethical AI. Big concern, little concern. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a huge concern.
I do
Actually,
too.
it's something that should be our on the top of our minds. Actually, is what I would say. Josh is business leaders. I think I always love when I was in college and then in business school, I always loved the plate of, as a business leader, your job is to balance a plate on a stick here in many ways.
Right.
And you have stakeholders that sit around that plate, and you can never focus too much on one stakeholder because that plate's going to tip,
Right.
and then you're going to lose the rest of your stakeholders. And
But we, from an engineering standpoint, in that technical foundation that you talk about, the unified data platform, kind of an AI tech ops kind of patterns starting to shape up where I think ethical AI fits in as part of that security architecture is almost step one.
yep.
And do you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, let me just continue with my example if I can,
Sure.
and I'll
Yeah, please.
circle back there. Look, I think if you there are plenty of perspectives in the market that say, hey, whatever AI does, AI does. But what I think is back to the analogy plate is that, look, if I focus too much on my employee's need and cater too much to my employee, or I cater too much to an investor, or I even cater way too much to a customer and disrespect an employee, I haven't done my job as a business leader.
Right.
And I think it's the same from an AI standpoint, especially if you think about from this agent. An agent is really welcoming a new employee into our workforce. And I think we have to be very mindful of what that employee is doing.
I believe I understand what you're saying as AI should be measured like an employee, and perhaps BI provides us that lens to look down across my AI initiatives and measure the return on investment, its ethical behavior, but also in that tech foundation, I should have that ethical slice. Ben, I want to thank you for coming. Great conversation. Hope to have you back soon. Again, thanks so much.
Josh, I loved it. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. All right, see you.